The sun shimmered above the hills of Ikoyi, Lagos, casting a golden glow over the lush compound where my wedding was being held. Everything was perfect, too perfect. The band played soft high-life music in the background, waiters in white uniforms served chilled drinks, and guests shimmered in their finest lace attires. I stood at the center of it all in my ivory dress, smiling politely, my heart thudding in my chest. But deep inside, something felt wrong. My name is Amara Okoye, and this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was marrying the love of my life, Chuka, a calm, respectful man from a good family. I had waited my whole life for a moment like this. But nothing could have prepared me for what my mother was about to do. The guests had begun to settle. My bridesmaids had just taken their seats, and Chuka was standing at the altar, adjusting his agbada nervously. Everything was going according to plan until my mother, Mrs. Cecilia Okoye, elegantly dressed in emerald green lace and layers of gold, stood up with a wineglass in hand. She tapped the microphone gently. "Excuse me, everyone," she said with a voice too sweet for what she was about to drop. "Before we continue, there's something I've carried for too long. Today seems like the perfect day to let it go." The laughter and chatter among the guests faded. Even the DJ paused the music. All eyes turned toward my mother, and then to me. I felt a strange chill down my spine. I knew my mother. She wasn't one to make spontaneous speeches. She was calculated, cold, strategic. She smiled, looked around the crowd, and said, "Amara is not my biological daughter." The words hit the air like a car crash. I froze. My vision blurred. Guests gasped and muttered. Chuka's eyes widened. My father, Chief Kenneth Okoye, looked up slowly from his seat at the high table, his expression unreadable. I wanted to run. Scream. Cry. Anything. But my legs were numb. My lips trembled. I stared at my mother, hoping she'd laugh and say it was a joke. But she didn't. She raised her glass to her lips and took a slow sip, satisfied with the silence she had summoned. She was adopted, she continued. Brought to us when she was just a week old. We never told anyone, not even her. But I believe the truth should no longer be hidden. Especially on such an important day. I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. I turned to my father, my rock, the man who had raised me like a queen. His face was tight, but his hands were trembling slightly. Was it true? Was everything I believed about my life a lie? Growing up, I never felt entirely loved by my mother. She was always distant, always harder on me than on my younger brothers. But I never thought too much about it, I just assumed it was one of those African mother-daughter dynamics. Dad, on the other hand, adored me. From school runs to taking me on business trips, he made me feel like the most important person in his life. But now everything made sense, the way Mum refused to call me her firstborn, the way she looked at me with quiet resentment, especially when I achieved something. Still in shock, I stood there, tears filling my eyes, feeling the weight of every guest's stare. That was when my father, my dearest father, slowly rose from his seat. The hall fell dead silent. He walked gently to the stage, took the microphone from the MC's hand, and turned to the crowd. Then he turned to me. His eyes were soft but heavy with emotion. "Yes, it's true," he began, his voice deep and calm. "Amara is not Cecilia's biological child." A fresh wave of murmurs swept through the guests. "But she is mine," he continued, his voice steady. "She is my daughter, and not just by name, but by blood." I blinked. "What?" He turned toward my mother with a look of fury and sadness. "You've carried this bitterness for years, Cecilia. But today? Today, you have crossed the line." Then he turned back to the guests. 30 years ago, I made a mistake. I had a short affair with a young woman in Enugu. She died during childbirth, and her family refused to take in the baby. I brought the child home, Amara, and told Cecilia everything. We agreed to raise her together and keep it private. Cecilia never forgave me, and she never truly accepted the child. But I did. Because Amara is my blood. The room was silent, heavy like a tomb. I couldn't feel my feet. My breath was short. My mind was spinning. My mother looked away, lips pressed tightly, as if she regretted nothing. So yes, my father said, now addressing the guests. Amara is my biological daughter, born from a mistake, but raised with love. She is my first child. She is the reason I changed from the reckless man I once was. She gave my life meaning. And today, I will not let her be shamed. Chuka stepped down from the altar and came to hold my hand. He whispered, "It doesn't change anything, Amara. I love you." But inside, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. The rest of the ceremony dragged on in awkward silence. The joy was drained from the air. People tried to smile and clap, but everyone was still processing what they had heard. I was processing too. The woman I had called Mummy for 30 years had hated me in silence. And the man I thought was just my adoptive father had been hiding the truth of my birth all along. That night, I sat alone in my hotel suite, still in my wedding dress. The makeup was smeared from tears. I stared at myself in the mirror and whispered, "Who am I?" The identity I had built for myself was shattered. My origin story was nothing like I'd imagined. I was born from betrayal. From shame. And somehow, all these people had decided that I didn't need to know. Why? 2 weeks after the wedding, I visited my parents' mansion in Ikoyi. My mother sat calmly in the living room, sipping tea like nothing had happened. "You had no right," I said, standing across from her, voice trembling. She looked at me blankly. "You deserve to know the truth." I was tired of pretending. "On my wedding day?" She said nothing. Just sipped again. Then she added coldly, "You were always a reminder of what he did. Of how he humiliated me. You were never mine. You just lived in my house." That cut deeper than anything else. "You could have told me in private. You didn't have to humiliate me." She shrugged. "You needed a lesson in humility." I realized then that she didn't care about me, not even a little. When I told my father what she said, he broke down crying. It was the first time I ever saw him weep. "I failed you, Amara. I should have told you the truth long ago. I didn't want you to carry the burden of my mistake." I forgave him, not immediately, but eventually. Because in all the ways that mattered, he was a better parent than she ever was. But the damage was done. The wounds were deep. The question still haunted me. Was I truly loved? Was I really wanted? And if this was my real story, what did it say about the woman I had become? For weeks after the wedding, I avoided social gatherings. What was meant to be a celebration of love had become a battlefield of secrets. My wedding photos went viral online, not because of the dress or decor, but because a family friend live-streamed my mother's announcement. "Billionaire's wife exposes bride as illegitimate at her own wedding," the headlines mocked my pain. I stayed holed up in my new apartment in Lekki with Chuka, but even his warm presence couldn't quiet the storm in my heart. I felt like an unfinished puzzle, pieces missing where my identity should have been. Who was my birth mother? Did she love me? Why did no one ever tell me the truth? One afternoon, as I sat alone flipping through old childhood photos, my father called. "Amara, there's something you need to see," he said, his voice quiet but firm. When I arrived at his private office, he pulled out a dusty leather file from his safe. Inside were letters, handwritten notes from a woman named Neka. My mother. "She wrote me before she died," my father said. "She begged me to tell you about her. But I couldn't do it then. I thought protecting you from the truth would preserve your peace. I sat down, hands trembling as I opened the first letter. To my sweet baby Amara. If you are reading this, it means you've grown into a beautiful woman. I am so sorry I couldn't be with you. Life dealt me a cruel fate, and I left too soon. But never think for a moment that you weren't wanted. You were my greatest gift. Tears poured freely down my face. Each letter carried more truth than anything I'd heard from the woman who raised me. My mother, my real mother, had loved me. But her story was erased, hidden behind wealth and shame. I felt anger boiling again. Not just at Cecilia, but at everyone who had kept me in the dark. At a system that treated women like her, like trash when they had no family, no power, no voice. A week later, I decided to confront Cecilia one last time. She sat at the balcony of her mansion, sipping tea, unmoved by the fallout she had caused. I found her letters, I said. Nneka. Her grip on the teacup faltered slightly. She loved me, I added. She named me Amara. It wasn't you who gave me that name. I did what I had to do, she said flatly. To keep my home, my dignity. Your father humiliated me by bringing you here like a lost puppy. I stared at her, feeling no hatred now, just pity. I used to wish you'd love me, I said. I used to wonder what I had done wrong to make you hate me. But now I see it had nothing to do with me. You were the wound that never healed, she whispered. And I was just a child, I replied. But that never mattered to you. As I walked away, I realized something. I could finally stop chasing her approval. The woman who gave birth to me had loved me. The man who raised me had protected me. And I had survived. Months passed. The wounds didn't heal overnight, but each day gave me more clarity, more peace. I stopped seeing myself through my mother's cold eyes. I started to redefine who I was, not as someone's shameful reminder, but as someone whole. One afternoon, I stood beside my father at his charity foundation's annual event. It was held at a local community center he funded, the kind of place my birth mother might have once passed through unnoticed. This year, he handed me the microphone to speak as the new director of Girls' Empowerment Initiatives. It was a role I had once declined out of fear. But now, I saw it as my path forward. I looked out at the crowd, women from shelters, students, widows, business leaders, journalists. I was raised in a mansion, I began, voice steady, but my heart didn't find a home until I learned the truth about who I am. The crowd quieted. My name is Amara. I was born to a woman society discarded, raised by a man who hid his greatest mistake with the best of intentions, and wounded by a woman who never forgave either of them. For years, I questioned my worth, thinking love had to be earned. But now I know, love is not a currency. It's a right. A few heads nodded. I share this because too many young girls are made to feel unworthy because of where they come from, who their parents were, or what mistakes created them. But your beginning does not define your worth. You do. Tears rolled silently down a few cheeks in the audience. Today, we're launching a program in memory of my biological mother, Nneka. A woman who died in silence, but whose voice now lives through mine. We will give scholarships to young girls in shelters, vocational training to teen mothers, and a platform to those who've been shamed for simply existing. The applause was thunderous. My father stood beside me, clapping through his tears. Later that night, I visited my mother's grave. Cecilia had died a month earlier from a sudden stroke. I didn't visit her in the hospital, she didn't want to see me. Her last words to my father were reportedly, "She will never be mine." Still, I came to say what needed saying. I stood by her tombstone, a bouquet of white lilies in my hand. "You hurt me," I whispered. "But I forgive you." The wind rustled the trees gently. In that stillness, I found peace, not because she deserved it, but because I did. I laid the flowers down and walked away, leaving behind the burden of being unwanted. At home, Chuka was waiting. He hugged me tightly and said, "You're finally breathing differently." "I feel lighter," I smiled. "You've found yourself." "Yes," I nodded. "And I'll never let anyone define me again." Sometimes the greatest betrayals in life come from silence, from the truths never told, from the love withheld out of pride. Amara's story is not just about a ruined wedding or a hidden identity. It is about reclaiming your voice when the world tries to erase you. It is about choosing healing over hatred. It is about realizing that family isn't just blood or titles, it's truth, it's choice, and most of all, it's love that stays even when the masks fall off. In the end, Amara wasn't just the daughter of a billionaire or the child of a forgotten woman. She became her own name. And that was enough.